Here are the topics discussed in today's video. What is a preservative? Why you need preservatives? When do you need a preservative? How to choose your preservative? And a list of preservatives I've used and recommend. What is a preservative? A preservative keeps your product fresh. They help fight off yeast, mold, and bacteria from growing in your products. A preservative protects from potential infections and irritation that may occur if a contaminated product is used on your skin. Making sure your products are properly preserved is the most important part of formulating cosmetics. Why you need preservatives. You need a preservative to keep your skin safe and healthy. Just because a product doesn't have visible mold, that doesn't mean it can't have any harmful bacteria or yeast in it.
You could get a really serious infection if you use a bad product on your skin. If you want to avoid using preservatives, the only way to really do that is by making and using anhydrous products. And anhydrous products don't always suit everybody's skin type. You could also use soap, but soap has a really high pH and can irritate and dry out some people's skin, especially if they have sensitive skin. So technically, yes, you can make products without preservatives, but a lot of these preservative-free products aren't really favored by many consumers.
I get asked a lot if you can keep a product in the fridge instead of adding a preservative. You can, but it's only going to be good for a couple of days, and it isn't very feasible making new products weekly just to avoid adding a preservative. I hear a lot about how people want to avoid preservatives because they are toxic or bad for the skin. Yes, a lot of preservatives can be toxic or bad for the skin and body in high amounts, but it's the percentage that makes the poison. Too much of anything is a bad thing. You can literally die from drinking too much water. So it really is the percentage that makes the poison when it comes to anything. One more thing I want to add is no, you can't use fresh fruit or vegetables in your products, as they will spoil quickly.
There's no way to preserve that. If you want to make a product with fresh produce, you're going to have to use it all immediately.
When do you need a preservative? You need to add a preservative to your product if your product contains water or may come in contact with water.
Now, when I say water, I'm not only referring to actual water, but hydrosols, floral waters, essence waters, glycerin, propanediol, extracts, anything that is water soluble.
An example of a product that does not contain water but may come into contact with water are body scrubs. There are some exceptions to needing a preservative. For example, if a product has an extremely high pH or low pH, but we aren't normally making products with a very low pH or high pH, as that can be really bad for the skin. So that rule won't really come in handy often. Or if the product contains about 5% or less of water and a very high input of salt or sugar.
I don't know about you, but personally it takes me forever to use a body scrub, and I definitely know more water is getting into that body scrub from my wet hands. So I personally prefer to use a preservative in my body scrubs for this reason. You also don't need to preserve soap. That's because soap is actually self-preserving, and there may be a few other exceptions where you don't need a preservative, but that's overall all the examples I can think of right now. For the most part, just remember, if a product contains water or might come into contact with water, then you need to make sure you're using a preservative. It's better to be safe than to use a moldy product or a product filled with bacteria all over your face or your body.
How to choose your preservative. I always recommend buying a broad spectrum preservative rather than trying to come up with your own preservative system. Some preservatives, like phenoxyethanol, is weak against mold and yeast, so it has to be paired with another preservative like potassium sorbate or ethyl hexylated glycerin. So when shopping for a preservative, always look for the statement broad spectrum, and make sure it mentions that it's strong against bacteria, yeast, and mold. There are a few things you need to consider when choosing your preservative. First, is your product aqueous or anhydrous? This will determine whether you need a preservative that is water soluble or oil soluble. The second thing you need to consider is your product's pH. A lot of preservatives are sensitive to pH levels, meaning they aren't active in certain pH levels. There are a few other things to consider, but they are more personal to each individual preservative. Preservatives I've worked with.
So I'll start with my number one preservative I recommend for all beginners.
Liquid Germall Plus. Liquid Germall Plus is a formaldehyde releaser and has some restrictions in certain countries. In US and Japan, it is not approved for use in aerosols, but is approved for use in creams, lotions, and rinse-off products. In the EU, it is not approved for oral hygiene and lip care products. It's also not to be used in products for children under 3 years old, except in bath products or shower gels and shampoos. And it is not to be used in body lotions and body creams. This is a very inexpensive preservative, and I find it available on so many different websites. It is a water-soluble, broad-spectrum preservative. It is a clear liquid. You only need to use it at about 0.1 to 0.5%, but I always recommend using preservatives at the highest recommended usage rate. So use it at 0.5%. It is effective in pH levels between 3 to 8. Just like most preservatives, it is heat sensitive, so make sure you add it in formulations when the formulation is under 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit. This preservative is so versatile. You can use it in face washes, body washes, moisturizers, creams, lotions, toners, facial mists, etc. Basically, if you want to buy a preservative that can be used in all your products, this is your guy. Of course, if you're in certain countries, restrictions apply. Here's the INCI of Liquid Germall Plus. Euxyl PE 9010. Euxyl PE 9010 is paraben-free and formaldehyde-free. It is a globally approved preservative. Its INCI is phenoxyethanol and ethylhexylglycerin. It's water-soluble up to about 1%, and it is a broad-spectrum preservative. It is a clear liquid. It is active in pH levels between 2 to 12, so this makes it very versatile in formulations. I'm often asked what preservative I recommend for liquid soap. This is a good option for that. It is stable in temperatures up to 120 degrees Celsius and 248 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is recommended to be used at 0.5% to 1%. There are two main things to keep in mind when using this preservative. First, it has limited solubility in water, so it is recommended to first mix it with propylene glycol or propanediol. It is moderately soluble in glycerol and sorbitol.
I often do use glycerin to solubilize this preservative, but I have noticed I do have better results when I use propanediol, but overall glycerin does work. Another thing to consider when using this preservative is high loads of ethoxylated surfactants can actually result in a loss of efficiency with this preservative.
The same effect is observed with parabens. Ethoxylated surfactants are PEG ingredients, and ingredients with the letters ETH, F, in the word. For example, sodium lauryl sulfate, satiric 20, and polyethylene glycol, along with any polysorbates like polysorbate 20, 60, and 80, and also a high load of ethoxylated surfactants is anything over 1%. Keep that in mind. You can use it with ethoxylated surfactants, but the percentage needs to be lower than 1%. There are lots of other preservatives under the brand name Euxyl that I recommend you checking out and considering. Euxyl K900, Euxyl K903, and Euxyl K703. Optiphen Plus. Optiphen Plus is paraben-free and formaldehyde-free, and it is globally approved. Its INCI is phenoxyethanol, caprylyl glycol, and sorbic acid. It is a water-soluble broad-spectrum preservative, and it is a liquid that is a clear yellowish color. It is most effective in pH levels below 6. Add to formulations when temperatures are below 80 degrees Celsius. Optiphen Plus is recommended to be used at 0.75 to 1.5%. Optiphen Plus has a reputation of destabilizing emulsions. It is very possible to use it in emulsions, but don't be surprised if it breaks the emulsion. Other than that, it's a pretty easy preservative to work with. I can't personally use it in products that I put on my face though.
For some reason it burns my face, but I can use it in body care products like body washes, shampoos, body lotions, stuff like that. I've actually talked to a lot of other people who've had this same issue, but I've also talked with a lot of people who don't have this issue. So I definitely wouldn't count it out until you give it a try, and definitely let me know down in the comments if it burns your skin or if it doesn't burn your skin.
Optiphen. Optiphen is paraben-free and formaldehyde-free and is globally approved. Its INCI is phenoxyethanol and caprylyl glycol. It claims to be water-soluble and oil-soluble, but in my experience, it doesn't solubilize in products that don't contain a solubilizer or emulsifier. So I don't recommend it to be used in products like serums and toners that don't involve an emulsifier or solubilizer. It's most effective in pH levels between 4 to 8 and is recommended to be used at 0.5% to 1.5%.
I personally only use this preservative in anhydrous body scrubs. And unlike Optiphen Plus, this preservative actually doesn't burn my skin when I use it in facial products.
Ecocert preservatives. Geogard Ultra also goes by the name NeoDefend and MicroGuard. It has a wide range of global regulatory acceptance. It's also ecocert and Cosmos accepted. And here's its INCI, I'm not going to try to pronounce that first word. It's soluble up to 4% in ambient water. It can be easily dispersed in glycols and alkyl sulfates. It's recommended to be used at 0.75 to 2%. It is most effective in a pH between 5.4 to 5.5. To maximize the pH stability of the final formulation, it may be necessary to employ use of a sodium citrate buffer and pH adjustment as described in the formulating guidelines. Please click the link in my description box of this preservative to learn more about stabilizing it, because I highly recommend doing so because this preservative is pretty tricky to work with.
In my experience, this preservative is really hard to work with. A while back, I actually did do a video over on Patreon reviewing this preservative, and I actually had really good luck with it. But ever since then, I don't know, it hasn't really worked out for me. But then again, I didn't really try that hard those other times because I have so many other preservatives to use that are way easier to use that I just prefer over this one. Overall, I really do not recommend this preservative for beginners.
Geogard ECT. Geogard ECT also goes by Preservative Eco. It's approved for use in the US, Europe, and Japan. It meets the Cosmos and ecocert standards. Its INCI is benzyl alcohol, salicylic acid, glycerin, and sorbic acid. It's not completely water soluble, especially in toner formulations, and it's recommended to be used at 0.6 to 1% and a pH between 3 to 8.
So I actually don't have any personal opinions on this preservative since I've never used it myself.
Leucidal SF Completes. It's ecocert and Cosmos approved. Its INCI is lactobacillus ferment, lactose bacillus, and Cocos nucifera fruit extract. It's basically coconut fruit extract. It's water soluble, recommended to be used at 2 to 4%, and is active in pH levels between 3 to 8. It claims to combine multiple antimicrobials to create broad spectrum protection from bacteria, yeast, and mold.
So here are my personal thoughts. If you're not new here, you may remember that Leucidal SF Complete used to be my go-to preservative for mainly everything. But I have definitely changed my mind on this. I don't like to use it as my main broad spectrum preservative because I really don't feel like there's been enough testing done on natural antimicrobials for me to feel completely comfortable using it as my main broad spectrum preservative in my skincare products. Although I do like to pair it with my broad spectrum preservatives for the antimicrobial benefits and also for the wonderful skin moisturizing benefits that Leucidal SF Complete offers. And I also don't recommend using it in products like toners, things that are very thin and liquidy, because it does cause the product to look cloudy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it could become an aesthetic issue for you. And also I've noticed sometimes it causes clumps in toners. I actually have a whole video about this. I'll link that video down below if you want to learn more about it. I can't say that I'm 100% comfortable using any of these ecocert preservatives that I mentioned as my sole preservative in the products that I sell. Now, I do feel comfortable using them in products that I just use on myself. The reason I'm not fully comfortable using them in products that I sell is because there's not enough research done on them. They can be a bit finicky. They can destabilize pretty easily, and overall just aren't as effective as the other preservatives I've mentioned. Yes, they are more favored by consumers nowadays, but as someone whose main priority is safety for their customers, I can't comfortably use them. Now, you may be wondering why larger companies are able to get away with this. It's because that larger companies have a bigger budget, so they can afford doing proper testing to make sure their products are stable and properly preserved and have accurately determined shelf lives with these ecocert preservatives. And they are also making their products in actual labs, so their products are made in cleaner environments as opposed to us who make our products from our home. Even though we do practice very good sanitation, there's no way that our environment is cleaner than in actual labs. But of course, you do what you want to do. This is just my own personal opinion. There are tons of other preservatives out there. These are just a few that I've had experience with and a few that I'm familiar with. If you have preservatives that you recommend, link them down below. I'll also be linking to all the preservatives I mentioned in this video down in the description box. So if you want to learn more about these preservatives, click those links because the links will take you to their listings where you can purchase them, where there is also a lot of information about how to formulate with them and everything you really need to know about them. And now with all that said, let's move on to the Q&A portion of this video because I actually posted a story letting you guys know I was working on this video, and I just asked if any of you guys had any questions over preservatives, and a lot of those questions you asked I've actually already addressed in these videos, so I won't be answering all of them, just the ones that maybe need a little bit more explanation or things I didn't touch on. So somebody asked, please about pH of each preservative and also the shelf life of products with each preservative. So I already answered the thing about pH. Each preservative is active in only specific pH levels, but in regards to the shelf life of products with each preservative, just because you're using Liquid Germall Plus in like a toner and a face wash, that doesn't mean both of those products will have the same shelf life. The shelf life isn't determined from the preservative, it's determined from the overall formulation of the product. You can't really get a definite shelf life just from yourself at home. You actually have to have it sent out to a lab and have them lab test it to get an accurate shelf life. But I do have a method of determining an estimated shelf life. I'll link that video down below. I talk all about it in that video. Why are people against preservatives? Is there harm in preservatives? I slightly talked about this in the video, but overall, people have issues with preservatives because of a lot of false information out there. It isn't the ingredient that is technically the poison or the toxin. It's the concentration of the ingredient that makes it the toxin. Too much of anything can be harmful, and that's the same thing that goes for preservatives. You are risking way more health-wise using products without preservatives that should have preservatives, as opposed to using products with preservatives. Any products not to use stuff like Amticide coconut. So Amticide coconut is an antimicrobial. It's actually an ingredient in Leucidal SF Complete. Leucidal SF Complete is compiled of 3 different antimicrobials to make it stronger. So if you are going to go with an antimicrobial as your preservative, make sure you're using multiple ones rather than just one. So do not use just Amticide coconut as your preservative. But as of what I know, there aren't any products that you can't use Amticide coconut in. I mean, I don't know. I don't have too much knowledge on just Amticide coconut, but looking at Leucidal SF Complete that contains Amticide coconut, it's just basically what I mentioned in the Leucidal SF Complete section. Oh, the next question, I kind of already answered it. Should Amticide coconut be used solely or in conjunction with something else? In conjunction with something else. I kind of discussed all that in this video. When selling products, should preservatives always be paired with chelating agents? Yes. I don't talk about chelating agents on this channel, really. I've talked about it over on Patreon. I feel like it's more something for advanced formulators, I guess. But chelating agents help the preservative stay active, so it will, make your preservative last longer and work better. It does a lot of amazing overall things. If you want to know more about chelating agents, I have a blog all about it over on my Patreon, or you can just go on Lotion Crafter, look up chelating agents, and read what they do. Are there specific preservatives that should only be used when making face wash, etc.? I mean, nothing that I can really think of. I hope the information I addressed in this video kind of helps answer your question a bit more. Difference between phenoxyethanol and preservative eco / geogard. So preservative eco and geogard are the same preservative, they just have different names depending on who's selling it. There's a huge difference between the two. Phenoxyethanol is a completely different ingredient than preservative eco and geogard. They're not similar in any way at all. Preservative boosters. Chelating agents, that will help. Also, add in some antimicrobials, that could help as well. But chelating agents is definitely the best way to boost your preservative. I'd like to understand the different types and how we can mix them as primary and secondary. So I personally don't recommend making your own preservative system, especially if you're a beginner. If you have a lot of experience, I think it's totally fine. But I recommend just going out and purchasing a broad spectrum preservative so it's already compiled of all the preservatives you need. But if you're going to make your own preservation system, you need to make sure it's strong against bacteria, mold, and yeast. So make sure you're using multiple preservatives that have all those covered. A lot of people are just asking about natural preservatives and organic preservatives. I already talked about that. Stability testing, you can outsource stability testing from labs. I'll link to one down below. That's a little bit more expensive, or you can buy microbial test kits from Lotion Crafter or Formulator Sample Shop and do it yourself. The least to most effective preservative and their usage for every different product. I wouldn't say products can be ranked by most effective to not effective. It determines for the overall formulation. Now, would I say are synthetic preservatives stronger than organic, natural, ecocert preservatives? Yes. Someone said different natural, no chemical preservatives. Everything is a chemical, even water, so even if you're using a natural or ecocert preservative, it's still a chemical. So there are no natural ecocert preservatives at all. Even if you're using a self-preserving product like soap, it's still compiled of a bunch of different chemicals. So there are no chemical-free preservatives. But if you're referring to like ecocert or natural, I already discussed those in this video. And overall, all the other questions are pretty repetitive or things I've already addressed in this video. So that is it for the Q&A. I hope it helped. Let me know if you like this Q&A addition to my Formulating for Beginner series. And if you did, I'll start doing this for all of my videos for my Formulating for Beginner series, or at least in the videos where it would make sense. And that is it for today's video. I really do hope this video was very informative for you beginners, or even if you're not a beginner, I hope you found this enlightening in some shape or form. And if you have anything else you would like to say about preservatives, advice, preservatives you like or suggest, your experience with any specific preservatives, leave them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and it will help my viewers as well. And that is it. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for my next video. Later.
At Stardust Bath & Body, Nature's Farm Girl, Kennedy's Essentials, LettsBlend, Wallflower Wildflower, Heartfelt Beauty, KAJ Bath & Body, Blue Mint Soaps, Salt Air Label, Lenise Beauty, Shark City Naturals, Ohana Lay, Danny Botanicals, at Nino55, K & Cool, Hempy Girl, Brie Maquillage, Alchemy and Clay, and Bible Belt Boutique. I also sell skincare products myself over on Etsy. My Etsy shop will be linked below, along with all my lovely patrons.
I'm stuck in the motions. I've been consumed by the wrath of time, like I'm shattered in this life. It's still the path that I've chosen, because I've had a vision. Now I'm on a mission to find myself with you.